Okay, so today we're going to be talking to a very special success story named Laura, who successfully gotten her ex back. And what we're going to do is we're going to be asking her all kinds of questions about how she did it. So, how are you doing, Laura?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I know nothing about your situation. So why don't you just kind of give us a little bit of a primer on how the breakup went down and what you had to do to get him back?
Yeah, so basically it was last February I actually broke up with him, which I know a lot of the stories were that people broke up with them. But
Right,
I was
right.
actually split up with him for about 3-ish months before I found the program. And then I decided to obviously proceed with it and start my no contact. I did the first time because we hadn't had any like arguments or anything like that, like I know some people had had previously. So it was 21 days that I did, but I think I did like 22 or 23, the first no contact that I did. And then after that, we were doing the texting phase of the program where I'd like send him messages and it was just normal texting really. I use like the online stuff a lot, so through social media and asking for help on like how to text and in the right way so that obviously I'm getting responses. But it was always quite positive responses. We live quite close to each other, so when I was like going out, I'd see him out, and then he'd be asking me if like I wanted to meet up and stuff like that. Whilst we're in the texting phase, so we did meet up with him because he was saying, "Is there any chance that we can get back together?" That kind of thing. But I'd already at that point, because I was focusing on me and like my Trinity and stuff like that, and making sure that I was making the most out of my situation at that time. I was planning on going away and I was going traveling over the summer. So although we were in the texting phase, it kind of wasn't really working out because I had too many plans. So I'd like overdone it almost. I came back in the September, so that was kind of like June time. We were speaking quite a bit, and then I went away, and then I came back in the September and was speaking a bit more then. And then we met up, and he said that he didn't want to proceed with things, and he thinks he should date other people. And I just said, well, if you want to date other people, that's fine. And I spoke to some of the people on the group at the time, and I decided to do another no contact for 21 days. But it ended up actually being 30 days because through that time I've seen him out like 3 times. So it
So
was like,
you
oh,
just so you live close to him, so you just happen to like run into him.
yeah, and lives like round the corner. So yeah, I just well, it was like at pubs and stuff like that, like when you're out with your mates, and then he'd just turn up. There was one situation where I was out, and we were in a pub, and he came up and behind me. This was only like a week and a half after we'd had that conversation, so I was in no contact, and he came up behind me, and I was with my mates, and he slapped my bum in front of like all of my friends. I know. And obviously, I told the people on social media, and they're like, "Oh no, just prolong your no contact for some more days." So that's why I did it for the 30 days.
Had he been
Um,
drinking or something? That just
oh
doesn't.
yeah, I think he was definitely
Okay.
drunk. So yeah, like throughout the no contact as well, he was like contacting me, which I didn't have in the first no contact. He only contacted me in like the first couple of days, but throughout that whole 30 days, he was contacting me, and I think he thought, "Oh no, she's definitely gone now," because before I was kind of still hanging on, if you get what I mean. Like I don't think I'd fully like left the situation, but by the time it had come to September and I'd done all the stuff to like um make him see me how I was, I guess, previously when we first met, um, then yeah, I think it got to day 30. So he'd been sending me messages throughout, but I hadn't responded. And then it got to day 30, and literally on day 30 he was ringing me. So rang me like 3 or 4 times, but I was on the way to meet one of my mates, so obviously I didn't answer. But it was a Saturday as well, and that's off limits, so I wasn't going to answer anyway. And then on the Sunday, he rang me like another 3 times, I think it was, and then I answered, and we had a conversation. And he said, "Oh," he originally said, "Can we meet?" And I said, "I can't meet him." So we had a conversation over the phone instead, where he said that he regretted everything and he wanted to sort things out. And then we just kind of dated after that. So it was just dating. We dated until kind of December, and then I was like thinking, oh, things aren't going to work out at that point because it had been so long that we'd been dating in my head. And I think it was the same, like, I think he was scared about getting back together, but then after New Year, we got back together, and yeah, it all worked out in the end, and things are great now.
So from what I'm gathering, you like originally going back, you're the one who broke up with him. I'm assuming this happened last year.
Yeah, that's right. So it took like in total about 10 or 11 months for us to get back together after we broke
So
up. But for the
so
three
it
months
seems
prior, sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, so it seems to me like you initiated the first breakup. Am I remembering that correctly? And then he initiated another breakup, so it was kind of like this you said you got back together in September or something and then broke up
No,
again.
no. So in the September we were speaking again, but
So you weren't like
we
you weren't
hadn't
like
ever got back
official.
together in
Okay,
that
I
time, like
see. So you're not
officially.
official, you're just kind of like
Yeah,
talking.
yeah, that's it.
Um
So we were just talking and like dating and stuff at that time. Um, but then I think he was going through a lot anyway, like personally. So it just wasn't the right time for us to be getting back together then. So I think given given that space that we had, like made things a lot better to what it is now.
so when who's the one who asked or got to the point where you're asking like, hey, what are we? Are we back together? Like, how did that conversation go down? Where were you? What did he say? What did you say?
We'd had food at his house, and I just said like, where are we with things? And he said, well, we're always together, so we might as well just be together. And then then we're just together.
That was it, huh?
Yeah, that was
Super
it.
easy. It's almost surprising how simple it works to just like seal the deal, so to speak,
Yeah.
in
Well,
the
it's like that
relationship.
when you first meet someone, it's just different because I'd never been with someone, broke up with them, and then got back together with them.
So, man, it took you a long time. I mean, we're talking about almost a year. At any point, did you just sort of think to yourself, is this even worth it? Should I just give up? Were you ever at that point emotionally?
Yeah, it was like kind of in the December, like I felt like things were good like between us, but you know when you just like have a sense on this just isn't going to work out, shall I
Mm.
just leave? And I think that's when he realised that he needs to do more for us to kind of get back together. There were other times like throughout where I thought, is this really worth worth like my time and effort? Like when I was like away as well, because I travelled around Asia and I was away and I was still speaking to him and I'm like some of the time it was a bit not negative. What's the in between where just like not really much conversation, and felt a bit awkward. So even though like them because I was with him before I broke up for 4 years, um, like I know him, but it was weird because it felt like we couldn't speak naturally like at times throughout the process, but then when it was natural it was really good and that's when things were going well. But it was just like in that middle bit especially. um
So
yeah,
the middle bit, I guess, is what I'm more interested in. It seems like you went into no contact the very first time, and it worked pretty well. And then you got back in contact, and the two of you kind of like were talking back and forth. But what, in your opinion, went wrong to make him sort of scared to not want to commit, or what did you think didn't work about that?
well I think given the fact that obviously I broke up with him, I think that like hurt him a lot. I could tell like it kind of destroyed him a bit and I felt terrible about it. Like when you see like your best mate going through like heartbreak, it's a bit weird because you're going through the same thing, and that's what kind of happened prior to finding the program. And then when we like went after my first no contact and we went through that phase of like talking and not talking, I don't really know what was going through his head at the time, but I could tell like he was not himself around me. Like it took a lot for it to get to that again. That wasn't until after the second no contact and a bit more dating before we were back to like talking normally. But we didn't really go on proper dates like the first time after the first no contact. We didn't have anything like where we went out for a meal or that kind of thing. Whereas after the second, that's what we were doing. Like when we were going out, we were going out properly, not just like meeting, because it's easy to just meet up when you live around the corner. Someone like and just go for a walk or something, and that's what we were doing.
So you wouldn't
do in that time.
You wouldn't even like go for a walk at all after the first no contact whatsoever. Was it just more like you're texting and calling each other, but not doing anything else past that point?
Yeah, it was like there was like a week where we were both free, so we met up in that time, and then I think he was on holiday, then I was on holiday. So it was like there was very much we couldn't really meet up, like neither of us had the time to do that at that time, and I think that's why it didn't work the first time, because we both just had too many plans.
Did either of you guys date anyone else in the 10, 11 months it took for for you guys to get back together, like officially?
I'm pretty sure he was. Well, he has said that he did, so definitely did. I don't know when. Like, I'm not really interested in the detail, but I know they did. And for me, I spoke to people, but I didn't ever go on any dates with anybody else.
Okay. So throughout this 10-month period after the first no contact, coming up onto the second no contact, what caused you to make the decision to jump into a second no contact?
I think it was like he was in a bad place where I was losing a family member, unfortunately, and I think it was just like you know when you sit and have a conversation with someone and they're like just a bit all over the place, and you just know like this isn't going to work when either one of us is going to be feeling like that. That's kind of what happened. So although like I wanted to be there for him, I knew that he didn't want me to be there for him. Like I sat in and spoke to him, and I could just tell, like, I was like, I'm so sorry you're going through that. And he's like, well, it doesn't matter. Like, I just know that he didn't want me there. And then he started speaking about dating other people and maybe he's better with somebody else. And I said, well, if that's what you want to do and that's what's going to make you happy, then just go and do that then. And he kind of said, like, well, I'll just end up coming back to you. And I was like, well, just got to go and date other people. It was a bit like, well, I can't change your mind right now, so just go away.
So what I'm kind of curious about now is how effective the second period of no contact was, because it seems like before you had done the second no contact, you had tried a lot of things, but your schedule and his schedule just wouldn't overlap to the point where you could see each other in person pretty consistently. So you're just sort of stuck in this limbo where you can only talk or text over the phone. The second no contact, I think you mentioned that he contacted you quite a bit during it. Is that exactly what happened? And what were some of the contents of the messages? Like, what were some of the ways he would try to talk to you during that second period of no contact?
So we've always used the social media Snapchat quite a lot. Mm-hmm. No, I never opened them until after, because I was like, if I open them, then he'll be able to
know you read it.
And it's not really then no contact, is it? So I never opened them until afterwards. And then when I went through them, they're just like random things like what he's doing in the day and stuff like that. And like I'd put Snapchats up as well, like on my actual story, and he'd like comment on them, like, "Oh, can I come out for a walk with your dog?" and stuff like that. But obviously, I didn't open them until after the 30 days when we'd started speaking again. And then there was like he did send one really long message saying, like, and it was kind of middle of no contact, say like day 15 sort of time. Saying he does, like, just out of the blue, just like saying that he doesn't know where he's at in his head and that type of thing. I can't remember the whole message, to be honest, but it was like an emotional sort of message, but nothing to say, oh, I want to get back with you and stuff. It was very much still borderline, because all the way through it was like, I don't know what I want sort of thing, until he did know what he wanted.
So you guys eventually get back together, but going to that point, how long did it take after you got out of no contact to, like, how many months did it take before you get out of that second no contact to the point where you're actually back together? Like, how long were you talking to him, seeing him in person, or was it like a pretty quick, like, race to the finish?
It's about 3.5 months. 3.5 months until we got back together.
And how often were you guys talking on the phone? to each other, texting each other, and seeing each other in person? Was it like an everyday occurrence?
No, so to start with, it was kind of like once every like 2 to 1 week sort of thing. But then we were speaking in between by messages and like calling. And then it just kind of got closer together. And then by Christmas, we were seeing each other like every couple of days sort of thing. And
So
then
you're
it was
seeing each
pretty
other.
much not just after New Year, really, that we got back together.
So for you, you think seeing each other pretty much every single or every couple of days is really what spurred it on to get that sort of relationship back on track?
Yeah, I think so. I think like perhaps not. I don't know. Like it depends on the person that you're with, I guess. Like we're not like the sort of people that need to see each other all the time. Even though like he lives really close, it's not like I have to see him every day to feel like I'm in a relationship. But I do think like that closeness does make you like feel closer, I guess, to somebody, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it kind of does. It's sometimes hard to remember years back, like what you did and everything. Um, I guess when you look at your experience as a whole of going through the process, what do you think was the most effective thing that you did? Like for you personally, because every time I ask a success story of this, they always come up with really different answers that I wouldn't expect. So I'm kind of curious what yours is. When you look back at the whole situation, what is that one strategy that you use that you feel made the biggest difference for you?
I think it's like being more matter of a fact. Like, I think one of the reasons why we broke up in the first place was because we just weren't very good at communicating. So one thing that I did whilst I was in no contact and speaking to the people in the group was look at things like crucial conversation on, like it's not just about now, it's about like whilst we're now back together to have those conversations, it's got to be started somewhere. And rather than like coming across, well, I didn't like before when I was in the relationship with him, it was almost like everything just got shoved under the rug. Whereas now, like we actually speak about things, and that helps like during that time as well. So even whilst we were dating, we were having those conversations and building that up. And like now, like we can speak about anything because of that. I think like anything that's bothering either one of us, we can have conversations. Whereas I really do think like that just wouldn't have happened if I didn't find the program.
So you're saying, and this is interesting, you're saying that one of the biggest things you took was the fact that you need to be better at communicating throughout the entire, I guess, conversations that you have with him. Did you take that approach when you were trying to win him back even? Like when you were just talking to him?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I listened
Can you
to
give
like the
me,
whole program on YouTube.
can you,
And
oh, that's kind of cool. Can you give me like an example when you're trying to get him back of a conversation that you would have with him in this new way of thinking?
well, I mean, I suppose like that's more like if we're having like a complicated conversation, like talking about, be like if I'm messaging another guy or if he's messaging another girl, even like they might just be mates, but like those types of conversations where instead of just nagging and saying, "Oh, why are you messaging her?" It's more like you're having fun and you're having a laugh, and then in between you kind of sandwich in one of those types of conversations to say, "Oh, like." It's sort of like saying it the same, but not in trying not to say it in a naggy way, I guess. I can't like put the conversation into words that we would have had like at those times, like
Yeah,
those
yeah.
different moments. Um, but I think like one of the things that I tried to do is kind of just be straight to the point, like. And I think he's the sort of person that would appreciate that. I'm not saying that every single person that people are going to be with are going to appreciate that, but having that openness and just being like the conversation that we had before, no contact. Well, if it's you're not going to be happy with me, then go off with somebody else, and being straight like that. Kind of, I think that helped him to my advantage in the end. Like, it didn't feel great at the time, but he didn't know that. So to him, it was like, oh, well, she's just doing her own thing. But obviously inside, I was really thinking, oh, great, now we're just going to go off with somebody else. But that obviously didn't happen.
So So it's kind of interesting that you're to the point, because a lot of the clients that I work with are not ever to the point, and I'm kind of curious about your experience with it. Uh, do you mind if I give you like an example and just you tell me how you would have approached it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say after your second period of no contact, because that seems to be really where you started to see the biggest difference. For whatever reason, your schedules permitted seeing each other in person a lot more. It seems like you're talking a lot more consistently than maybe you were before. But after that second period of no contact, did at any point he sit back and start asking you about, like, hey, what are your feelings? Or was he scared to initiate something like that? How would you handle that situation?
So he didn't ask any of those types of questions. That all had to be me because he just doesn't ask anything like
Okay,
that.
so how would you handle it? Did you bring that up at all, and in what way did
Yeah.
you bring it up?
So it was kind of like it got to a point for me where I was a bit fed up. Like, am I just waiting around for you to kind of like ask me if we're going to be together or where things are going to go from here? And I did turn around to him and say, like, things do seem to be going well. So when are we getting back together? Um, like not demanding in that way, but like when are we going to sort things out and be back together? Because it's just getting a bit silly now. Like we are basically back together, but we've not got the label. Um, and at that time, he was a bit like, "Oh, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure." That type of thing. But then, like 2 days later, after we hadn't spoken, he's like, "Oh no, I do want to sort things out. Like, when are we next going to see each other?" So although like we'd have those conversations, sometimes they required like time afterwards, like whilst we were dating. Obviously not now, but whilst we were dating, I think like you'd have those conversations and then give it a bit of time and not like keep going over it, because I mean I've seen cases where people perhaps have done that in their situation, and then it just starts an argument, and we never had any of that. Like we didn't argue at all through the process.
Okay, so you said you would be the one to reach out to him and basically say, "Hey, what are we? Like, this is ridiculous," and he just kind of kept pushing it off. Um, would I be correct in assuming that when he would push it off, you just wouldn't push anymore?
Yeah.
Or, okay, so what would happen? And this is just purely theoretical because it didn't happen. How would you handle him coming back and saying something like, you know what? I really, really love you, but I'm just not ready for a relationship right now. If you can put yourself back in that frame of mind where you're trying to get him back, what is your approach to that situation? How do you think you would respond to it?
I'd just say, well, then we're not going to date, then, are we?
And would you back it up? I guess is my point, because I see a lot of
Yeah.
people who say that, but they don't back it up. But from what I'm gathering, it seems like one of your biggest advantages in getting him back was the fact that, like you said, you were willing to give him space after he was like kind of all over the place, and you said he had like a family member that had passed away, and you just sort of gave him space. It seems like you were willing to quote unquote lose him, and you were okay with that if that's what had to happen.
Yeah, so I'd say like if it had happened in kind of the first month of me like starting the program, maybe even the first 2 months of sorting it out, I'd have probably been a mess about it. But I think it just got to a point where I was like, well, I don't need you. I just was looking to for us to sort things out, and if it wasn't going to be sorted out, then that's fine. And that does help. And I think that's the point that I got to in the September. And that's why the second no contact worked so well for me, is because I wasn't bothered anymore.
So I guess my question for you would be, how did you get emotionally to that point? What were some of the things that you would do?
I mean, the biggest things really like when I went through obviously the book that you guys have, um, there were different points like I focused on that first part of the book really. I didn't really read much of the text messaging part of the book. I read more of that first part where you focus on yourself and look at your own relationships and what you do in the day. Like, are you spending time doing useful things or are you just sitting around type of thing? And I focused on my fitness. I learned how to play the guitar, which I can still play, and I'm like a year into it. Well, less than a year, but sort of coming up to a year that I've now been playing, and I've got really good at it. And that's all from starting this program that kind of gave me that. I was doing like therapy as well at the time, because I'd gone through some stuff earlier, which kind of like was one of the reasons why we'd broken up. And that helps in going through all of that like emotional clearance in my head. And then taking the time to myself like all over the summer and just sorting out my own issues, my own problems, and getting to a point where I just felt secure with everything. Because I think like the biggest problem for me, like at the beginning of starting the program, is I felt like really insecure about it. Like, oh, we're never going to get back together, or I really care about him, this is the end of the world. But that was obviously not the case, because that's not realistic. But at the time, that's how I felt in my head, because I was a bit of a mess and I needed that going through the program. Like when I searched on the internet, I thought, oh, it's just probably another scam. Like, no offense.
No
But it's
worry,
like
no
one of
worry.
them things, like you look for stuff on the internet, don't you, when you're like in a bit of a mess with yourself. And I think that was what it was. Like I'd never had problems like that before in relationships. It was just this one, for some reason, it had just gone a bit of a mess, and we were always fine up until like that kind of last couple of months. So yeah, I think just that focusing on myself, focusing in on the different things that I could do, whether it be going out with my mates, going and doing things on my own. Like there was a lot of stuff even whilst we started dating again, where we'd said that we were going to go and do it. But then I'd say, oh, well, do you want to come and do this with me, like as a date sort of thing? And if he said no, I'd still go and do it myself. And I think having that confidence and doing that through the program kind of helped me to achieve that.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. Almost every success story that I've talked to says something along the same lines of, you know, they stopped focusing so much on what their ex was doing and started focusing on how they were using their time. But I'm also curious in how you use the program, because a lot of people use parts of it and a lot of people don't use parts of it. So when you look back at your experience, you had mentioned the Facebook group. What do you feel like was the most valuable aspect of our program for you?
Probably, I say it probably is like the support of the Facebook group does really help, because although like the book's there and it is helpful like to read initially, when it actually comes to putting the messages together, like you can't read that off a book. It's always good to get somebody else's opinion, and having like all them people to back you up on what you're doing, you just know you're doing the right thing. And people that have gone through the program as well that have achieved that, and whether they've decided whether they want their ex back or not by the end of it, like they know what they're talking about, and they just, I see them like help people all the time, and they definitely helped me through that. Like some specific people that really like gave me a lot of help whilst I was going through it with like the stuff that I'd send, or just like generally like, oh, what would I respond to this type of thing, rather than using like the guide of the book is good, but because everyone's situation is so different in some cases to what's in the book, they kind of help to kind of bring it together for each person and their situation.
So would it be fair for me to say that you were at a point emotionally where you knew you were going to be okay even if you didn't get him back?
Yeah.
And would you agree with me when I say that that mentality you feel is important to your success of getting him back?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like all the people that I've spoken to on the Facebook group as well, like that's their thing as well. Like they say that that's how they felt, and the people that then seem happier in the group are the people that have gone through that and focused that time on themselves and been like, yeah, do you know what? It's not worth it anymore, or no, I still want him back, but if I don't get him back, then it's fine. Or her.
Or her. Usually, 90% of the people in the group right now are females, so very rare to get males in there, but there are a few males. Now, No, your situation is real interesting to me because I think yours really, really embodies that sort of moving on without moving on type mentality that is so hard to get. And so the reason I'm asking you so many questions about it is I'm trying to, for you, and this is, I'm just asking your honest opinion. Do you feel like that's something that you could sort of fake, or it's something that you really need to feel down to your core?
You definitely need to feel it. I think you can fake it to start with, but then there comes a point where if you keep faking it and you're not really feeling it, where you're just gonna not come out the other end and just still feel rubbish for months and months when you don't need to, if you just actually took that time just to focus on yourself. And those things don't, like, I know, like in the group we'll share like different ideas on what people can focus on. Like, you know, not everyone's got loads of money to be splashing on everything. So there are loads of things that people can do to focus on themselves, which stops you thinking about the other person in the situation.
It's true. That's true. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Laura. Your insight's always valuable to help everyone listening understand the mindset you need to have in order to get an ex back.
That's all right. Well, thanks for your help in getting my ex back.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ex-Girlfriend Recovery Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes and leave an honest rating and review. Also, don't forget to take the free quiz to show you what kind of chance you have with your ex on our website, www.exgirlfriendrecovery.com. We'll see you next week.